months earlier. The fairy tale didn't end with a wedding. It ended with an audit. No one saw the crack when it first appeared. Not the cheering crowds, not the glittering cameras, not even the palace that had perfected the art of hiding fractures behind velvet curtains. But behind the gold gates of Valemount Palace, a quiet storm had been building for months. And at the center of it stood a runaway prince, a Hollywood duchess, and a charity that was never supposed to raise questions. It started with a letter, not a dramatic one, not a threatening one, a beige envelope. Government seal, no emotion. The Aurelia Foundation, the global charity brand launched by Prince Adrian and Duchess Lillian after their dramatic exit from royal life, had failed to file its annual financial disclosures. Again, at first, palace officials ignored it. Adrian and Lillian were no longer working royals. Their California-based foundation was independent. Their brand was their business now. The crown had bigger concerns: trade summits, state visits, economic diplomacy. But then came the second notice. And the third. And sadly, the phrase non-compliant entity appeared in a regulatory database right next to the name Aurelia. That's when Princess Aloan stepped in. If Adrian was emotion, Aloan was steel. The king's sister, the palace's quiet enforcer. No social media, no documentaries. Just duty, 480 engagements last year alone. She didn't chase headlines. Headlines avoided crossing her. When the Internal Compliance Office flagged Aurelia's name in a reputational risk briefing, Aloan didn't panic. She asked for the file. What she received wasn't gossip, it was numbers. Donor funds listed under strategic development with no attached project reports. Community impact campaigns that appeared only in glossy videos, not in audited outcomes. Travel expenses coded as field humanitarian review that coincided with luxury resort stays. And then there was the branding. Invitations to fundraising galas overseas, describing Lillian as her royal grace and global service. Adrian introduced at events as representing a legacy of the crown. Partner websites describing Aurelia as working in continued alignment with the royal household. One problem: the royal household had never approved any of it. Behind palace walls, the language was careful, implied institutional association without formal sanction. Outside those walls, it was a ticking bomb. Because the monarchy didn't survive centuries by letting private ventures borrow its weight. Aloan called a closed-door meeting at Valemount. No press, no leaks. Just senior advisors, legal counsel, and her nephew, Crown Prince Marcus, the future king, known for his calm smile and ruthless memory. The question on the table was simple. Where does their foundation end? Marcus asked quietly. And where do we begin? Silence. Then the legal advisor spoke. If Aurelia collapses under investigation while still presenting proximity to the crown, public trust damage could be significant. That was all Leowen needed. She didn't shout. She didn't threaten. She drafted a protocol. 3 pages. Surgical. No royal titles may be used in connection with private commercial or charitable ventures without written palace clearance. No events overseas may imply representation of the crown by non-working royals. Any organization suggesting partnership with the monarchy without approval will face public disassociation. It wasn't punishment, it was distance. But distance, in royal language, can feel like exile. Adrian received the notice first. Sources say he read it twice, then a third time. Then placed it face down on the table and didn't speak for a full minute. Lillian, on the other hand, went straight to the phone. Her brand had been built on access, proximity, storytelling that blurred lines between past titles and present influence. The protocol didn't just restrict language, it removed the magic. Meanwhile, outside the palace, regulators weren't slowing down. Aurelia's filing showed rising executive salaries, falling donations, and multi-million consulting contracts to media production firms tied to Lillian's personal ventures. Impact reports relied on projected reach, not measurable outcomes. The narrative they sold the world was compassion. The paperwork told a story of chaos. When a foreign government quietly withdrew from a planned Aurelia partnership, citing governance concerns, palace officials realized the reputational spillover had already begun. That's when Aloan made her move. At a public address on civic integrity, an event no one thought would be explosive, she delivered a single line that landed like a guillotine. Service is not a spotlight you turn on when cameras arrive. It is a responsibility you carry when no one is watching. She never said their names. She didn't have to. Within hours, commentators drew the connection. Headlines exploded, debate panels lit up, social media split into camps. But inside Valemount Palace, the mood wasn't angry. It was resolved. Because the monarchy had reached a conclusion it had avoided for years, Adrian and Lillian weren't a family issue anymore. They were an institutional risk. Behind the scenes, Marcus approved the next step, a formal clarification statement to be released if Aurelia faced official sanctions. A line in that draft stood out. The Crown has no operational, financial, or representational relationship with the Aurelia Foundation. Cold, legal, final. Adrian reportedly called Marcus that night. It was the first direct conversation between the brothers in months. No one knows what was said, but witnesses say Marcus emerged from the call looking older and certain the fairy tale had officially collided with reality. And the Crown had chosen survival over sentiment. The statement dropped at 9:00 a.m. No warning, no dramatic build-up, just a clean, unemotional post on the official Royal Communications page, the digital equivalent of a velvet rope being pulled across a doorway that would never reopen. The Crown has no operational, financial, or representational relationship with the Aurelia Foundation. 16 words. That was all it took to turn whispers into wildfire. Within minutes, financial commentators, royal correspondents, and scandal-hungry influencers were dissecting every syllable. The phrasing wasn't accidental. It didn't say no longer. It didn't say at this time. It said no relationship. Past tense erased, present tense denied, future closed. Inside Aurelia's glass-walled Montecito headquarters, the mood flipped from tense to catastrophic. 2 major donors pulled funding before noon. A global education nonprofit paused a joint campaign pending governance review. A corporate sponsor quietly removed Aurelia's logo from its website. By lunch, staff were refreshing inboxes like people watching lifeboats leave a sinking ship. Adrian felt it first in the silence. His phone, once a non-stop stream of invitations, speaking offers, and partnership proposals, stopped lighting up. Messages that did come in weren't supportive. They were cautious. Legalistic. We need clarification. Our board has concerns. We'll revisit in Q4. Influence, he realized, had an expiration date, and the Crown had just stamped it. Lillian, however, wasn't ready to accept the fall. She called an emergency strategy meeting with their media advisors, brand consultants, and legal team. The room filled with words like narrative control, institutional retaliation, and public sympathy pivot. They discussed interviews, a possible documentary response, a carefully worded social media video about truth and transparency. But one problem kept surfacing: receipts. Because while emotion could win headlines, spreadsheets didn't cry on camera. And regulators weren't interested in feelings, they wanted documentation. Then came the leak. Not from the palace, not from a tabloid, from inside Aurelia. An anonymous former staffer sent internal budget summaries to an investigative journalist. Nothing illegal on the surface, but messy, inconsistent, spending on branding consultants larger than entire field programs. Projected impact slides used in donor pitches that didn't match real-world disbursement reports. The story ran with a brutal headline, "Inside the charity that looked bigger than its impact." It didn't accuse, it didn't dramatize, it simply compared promises to paperwork. And somehow, that was worse. Back at Valemount Palace, Princess Aloan read the article without visible reaction. Crown Prince Marcus stood beside her, hands behind his back, eyes scanning every line. "Do we respond?" Anade asked. Aloan shook her head once. "We already did." Because the palace understood something the outside world was just learning. Silence, when timed correctly, sounds like verdict. Public sentiment shifted fast, not into hatred, into disappointment. And disappointment is colder, harder to fight. It doesn't trend in outrage. It settles like dust and refuses to leave. Adrian tried to push back. A carefully staged appearance at a youth summit. A speech about resilience. About building something independent and authentic. But the introduction was different this time. No royal titles. No references to legacy. Just his first and last name. For the first time, the applause felt polite. Meanwhile, palace aides quietly implemented the final measure Marcus had approved weeks earlier, the title usage review. It didn't strip names. It didn't make dramatic announcements. It simply required that any public use of royal styling in professional contexts receive prior authorization. Authorization that would never come. Invitations that once read their Royal Highnesses began arriving addressed to Mr. Adrian Vale and Ms. Lillian Hart. Small changes. Earthquake effect. Behind closed doors, the strain between them grew. Not explosive fights, not slam doors, just the slow, suffocating pressure of two people realizing the world they built together ran on a currency that was losing value. Adrian missed the structure of duty, the clarity of roles, the rhythm of service. Lillian missed the spotlight, the rooms that leaned forward when she entered, the power of proximity to history. Now they had neither. And the Crown? The crown stabilized. Princess Eloine's approval ratings quietly climbed. Marcus increased public engagements focused on governance and youth employment. The message was subtle but firm: continuity, accountability, service. No documentaries, no counterattacks, just work. In the end, there was no dramatic expulsion, no televised confrontation, no revenge, just distance. A foundation downsizing, partnerships fading, invitations slowing, titles unused, influence thinning like mist in morning light. And somewhere inside Valamont Palace, Princess Eloine closed the Aurelia file and placed it in the archives, not under scandal, not under betrayal, under precedent. Because to the monarchy, this was never about emotion, it was about survival. Fairy tales end with weddings. Institutions endure by drawing lines. And when the line was finally drawn, the crown did not tremble, it simply stepped back and let gravity do the rest.